Whether we are talking about examination security, artificial intelligence, digital assessment, competency-based curricula, learners with special education needs, or effective utilization of assessment data, these are increasingly common African challenges requiring cooperation and shared solutions. That is why associations such as AEAA are so important. They provide a platform not simply for attending conferences, but for learning from one another, avoiding duplication of efforts, and adapting successfully solutions from one country to another. Distinguished participants, I've been informed that 81 papers on assessment issues in relation to the application of artificial intelligence were presented and discussed during this conference. This is an impressive demonstration of the expertise, innovations, and commitment available with our continent. However, the true value of these papers will ultimately be determined by how the knowledge generated here is translated into practice. The ideas discussed in Arusha should not remain only in conference proceedings, reports, or computers. They should contribute to better policies, improved assessment tools, more excitement, more efficient examination practices, and ultimately better learning outcomes for African children. Assessment must make a difference in the classroom. For example, where assessment results indicate that a significant proportion of learners in a particular district consistently struggle with basic mathematics, the response should go beyond publishing examination results or ranking schools. Such evidence should help us to identify whether the underlying challenges related to teaching methodology, teacher capacity, availability of learning material, curriculum implementation, or other factors. Most importantly, the evidence should inform what we do differently to improve learning. That is when assessment becomes a tool for improving education rather than simply a mechanism for awarding grades. Distinguished participants, I'm pleased to learn that many examination councils are already using information and communication technologies in candidate registration, marking, and proceeding of examination results. However, the use of ICT in examination item development and administration remains relatively limited. This conference has therefore come to an important time when artificial intelligence is rapidly changing the way almost every profession operates. It's just yesterday I was visiting one of the giant manufacturer here in Arusha, and he was telling me that in his company, even a cleaner to be employed, he must have a knowledge of artificial intelligence. So this is see how the world now is going. Consider, for example, the examination councils with thousands of assessment items accumulated over many years. Traditionally, analyzing those items according to competencies, difficult levels, curriculum areas, or learner performance may require substantial professional time. Appropriately designed technology can assist professionals to organize, classify, and analyze such information much more efficiently. However, the final professional judgment must remain with qualified assessment professionals, and this has been very much echoed by Dr. David here. When reading the communique, this was very much echoed. AI cannot independently determine whether an examination question is culturally appropriate, sufficiently valid, fair to learners from different environments, or appropriately designed for learners with special education needs. The principle we should therefore carry forward from Arusha is simple. We should use artificial intelligence to strengthen professional judgment, not to surrender professional judgment. Technology should assist the examiner. It should not replace the examiner. Distinguished participants, we must equally recognize that technological efficiency without integrity can undermine the entire assessment system. For example, an AI-supported system may enable an examination council to prepare or analyze examination items much faster. However, if the system is poorly secured and confidential examination material becomes accessible to unauthorized persons, the efficiency gain becomes meaningless because examination integrity has been compromised. Therefore, as we embrace AI and digital technologies, we must simultaneously strengthen cybersecurity, data protection, confidentiality, professional ethics, and institutional accountability. We must also ensure fairness and inclusion. Introducing sophisticated digital assessment systems without considering differences in access to device, connectivity, infrastructure, and digital literacy could unintentionally create new inequality among learners. Technology in assessment must therefore contribute to making our assessment more credible, more inclusive, more secure, more useful for improving learning. Technology should not be adopted simply because it is new. It should be adopted because it solves a genuine education or assessment challenge. Distinguished participants, regional cooperation is particularly important in this regard. There is a little value in every examination council independently investing time and resources to solve exactly the same technological and assessment challenges. For example, one country may develop an effective approach for AI-assisted item analysis, and another country may establish strong cybersecurity protocols, while another country may develop innovative approaches for assessing learners with special education needs. AAA can provide the bridge through which these experiences benefit the entire continent. I therefore encourage AEAA to increasingly move from knowledge sharing towards shared solutions. This may include developing common principles and guidelines for the responsible use of artificial intelligence in assessment, strengthening professional exchange between examination councils, building regional capacity in digital assessment and cybersecurity mechanism through which the successful innovations can be shared and adapted to different national contexts. Distinguished participants, another area that deserves particular emphasis is the use of assessment data for decision making. Across our countries, the examination councils generate enormous amount of assessment data every year. The real value of that data is realized when it informs decision at classroom, institution, and policy levels. For example, where national assessment repeatedly demonstrates weaknesses in science competencies, such evidence should inform teachers' professional development, curriculum review, teaching and learning materials, resource allocations, and classroom interventions. Assessment information must therefore travel beyond examination councils. It must reach the classroom, it must reach curriculum institutions, it must reach ministries and other decision makers, and ultimately, it must influence policy and resource allocation. Assessment without feedback produces information, and assessment linked to action produces improvement, and that is what we need. Distinguished participants, as we leave Arusha, every delegation should identify at least one practical idea from this conference that can be implemented within its institution. One successful practice from another African country that can be adapted to its national context, and one area of expertise or innovation that it can share with other AEA members. If you do this, the impact of this conference will continue long after we have left Arusha. I also encourage IEAA to establish mechanisms for following up the recommendations emerging from this conference. At future conferences, we should not only introduce new ideas, but also review commitments made at previous conferences, assess what has been implemented, identify what has worked, understand what has not worked, and document lessons for the wider African assessment community. That is how conferences move beyond discussion and become instruments of institutional transformation. As I move towards conclusion, allow me to leave you with 5 key messages from Arusha. First, artificial intelligence is a tool to strengthen, not to replace professional expertise. Second, innovation must never compromise examination integrity, confidentiality, or fairness. Third, technology must promote inclusion and should not widen inequalities among learners. Fourth, assessment data must be transformed into evidence for improving teaching, learning, resource allocation, and education policy. And fifth, African examination councils must collaborate more deeply so that we learn from one another and jointly develop solutions appropriate to our education systems. The future of assessment will certainly be more digital, more data-driven, and increasingly influenced by artificial intelligence. But ultimately, its success still depends on people, competent professionals, ethical institutions, responsible leadership, and our collective commitment to every learner. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Honorable Deputy Minister for Education, Science and Technology and the Government of the United Republic of Tanzania, I sincerely thank you for your participation, valuable contribution, and the time you've devoted to making this conference a success. I commend the IAE leadership, NECTA, organizers, sponsors, partners, and everyone who has contributed to the successful organization of this 42nd annual conference. To our brothers and sisters who have traveled from different parts of Africa and beyond, I hope that beside the conference rooms, you have also experienced something of the warmth and hospitality of Tanzania, and particularly the beauty of Arusha. As you return to your respective countries and institutions, please take with you not only the memories of Arusha, but also ideas that can be transformed into action, partnership that can be strengthened, and innovations that can be improved the future of assessment in Africa. I wish you safe and pleasant journeys home. It is now my great honor and privilege, on behalf of Honorable Deputy Minister for Education, Science and Technology, to officially declare the 42nd Annual Conference of the Association of Education Assessment in Africa closed. Thank you very much for your attention. God bless Africa, God bless Tanzania.
Tumedhamiria, tunaboresha elimu yetu.